about the importance of ensuring, if not complete agreement in the world, which is impossible, but at least readiness of great superpowers in any situation to maintain a normal professional dialogue, trying to be heard and hear and take lessons from what is happening and prevent conflicts and crises. This is the position of the Heir Prince, a position that was essentially repeated during our meeting with Marco Rubio, who in the beginning underscored the principal importance that every country be guided by its own national interests. A statement that we completely agreed with. Of course, those national interests are never always going to coincide, but when they differ, it's important to regulate them and discuss and prevent the provocation of any military confrontation or any other confrontation. But when those national interests align, then we need to do everything to unite efforts on these tracks for the sake of mutually beneficial projects, both in the geopolitical sphere and in economic affairs. So, the conversation was, I think, very useful, very valuable. We didn't just listen to each other, but we heard each other, and I have all reasons to believe that the American party now has a better understanding of our position that we based on numerous speeches by President Putin, and we had this opportunity to express it once again. The agreements that we achieved, number one, probably the most urgent one, and not the most difficult one, to ensure that ambassadors of Russia in America and America in Russia are assigned as soon as possible, and the obstacles that the Biden administration built for the last 4 years, obstacles in the way of our diplomatic missions, seriously hampering their work, sending out our diplomats, something that we had to respond to, seizures of our real estate and many other things, and bank transfers that are limited. So we have agreed that our deputies, as soon as possible, will agree on a meeting to look into the need to remove those artificial barriers and obstacles in the way of embassies and other establishments of Russia in America and of America in Russia. And to work systemically on removing them, to put an end to these difficulties that hamper the progress of our normal relationships. The other thing we agreed upon, soon there will be a process formed on the Ukrainian settlement. The American party will say who is going to be representing Washington in this project, and as soon as we know the name and position of the American representative, we, as President Putin agreed with President Trump, will immediately name our representative here. And the third thing, a more general one, we agreed to create conditions as the settlement process unfolds. We will create conditions for our cooperation to resume fully and expand to cover most different aspects. There was a great interest that we shared towards resuming consultations on geopolitical issues, including various conflicts in various parts of the world, where both the United States and Russia have interests. And there was great interest in removing artificial obstacles in the way of mutually beneficial economic cooperation. the discussion of economic aspects of our today's meeting. Head of the Russian Foundation of Direct Investments, Kirill Dmitriev, was present there, and he presented certain issues that could be soon resolved to the benefit of Russia and the United States alike. So please, your questions. There have been different estimates, and I would like to ask, on what track are our positions currently the closest? Have you managed to lay the foundation for a presidential meeting? And what are the next steps? What will be your next steps? Meetings, maybe? And the State Secretary said that concessions will be required from all parties. As for matters that we reached mutual understanding on, it doesn't necessarily mean bringing positions closer, but we have practically agreed that we need to once and forever solve the problem with functioning of our diplomatic missions. And as for our dialogue on international affairs, we have expressed our mutual commitment to finding specific solutions. As for the subject of Ukraine, the Americans are going to appoint their representatives. We will do the same. And after that, consultations will begin, and they will be regular. And as for foundation for presidential meeting, our presidents agreed actually to prepare a presidential summit, and to that end the National Security Advisor and the Minister of Foreign Affairs are going to meet to see what needs to be worked on before the presidents actually work out a specific date for their summit. I can't help but asking immediately after this meeting. There were a lot of rumors referencing sources close to the diplomatic process about a so-called three-stage plan that Russia and the United States agreed on Ukraine. And another question, before this meeting, the United States sent EU countries a questionnaire where they were asking about what EU countries can offer in terms of guarantees for Ukraine. And the question was asked about the possibility of sending a European contingent to Ukraine. How does Moscow view that? About a three-stage plan, I haven't seen the reports, but today when going through the news this morning, I found a reference to a statement by Foreign Minister of Poland, Radek Sikorski's statement, somewhere in the margins of the Munich conference. He said he had met with Kit Kellogg, and Kellogg informed him about a certain settlement plan. But commenting on that plan, Sikorsky said he can't go into details, but he said that the plan could be quite interesting, and I asked Mr. Rubio today what this could be, what this could mean, and they told me it was fake. And your other question about a certain questionnaire sent to the European Union with the goal of, as it says, better understanding of what the European Union is going to do and how the Americans can help there. Well, I mentioned that. I also said that potential deployment of any troops, of any armed forces or peacekeeping forces after the settlement is settled or an agreement is reached. Contingents, as this questionnaire said, The Americans would like to see what countries are ready to provide the troops. And today, at today's meeting, we explained and said that we noted very well that President Trump, in several of his speeches, the first among Western leaders, had said many times that drawing Ukraine into NATO is one of the main reasons of what is happening. That it's one of Biden's biggest mistakes. And had Trump been president back then, he wouldn't have let that happen. In this connection, we explained to our counterparts that President Putin had many times underscored that NATO expansion and Ukraine's entrance is a direct threat to the interests of the Russian Federation, a direct threat to our sovereignty. And for that reason, we said today, deployment of armed troops from NATO countries under any different flag, under an EU flag or under national flags, doesn't change anything. It's unacceptable to us. On the eve of the meeting, the armed forces of Ukraine attacked the Kropotkinskaya pumping station on a gas pipeline, on an oil pipeline that carries American and European oil through Kazakhstan. Is this a sort of a sign to Trump from Zelensky about what the Kyiv regime can do? And do you see any connection between the EU countries' statements? Do you see any connection with their claims of historical rights for Ukrainian land? As for this attack against the energy infrastructure of Kazakhstan, essentially, well, we can surmise all we want about what can be behind this order that someone in Kyiv actually gave, but this only goes to show that this cannot consider like that this man, Zelensky, and his entire team has to be brought to reason and had to be slapped hard. Today, our American counterparts were speaking about a sort of a moratorium, probably, to be imposed against attacks against objects of energy infrastructure. We said that we had never jeopardized and attacked civilian energy infrastructure. We only attacked objects that served the armed forces of Ukraine, the military assets of Ukraine. And there was a question of resuming the Black Sea deal. We expressed our readiness to discuss the modality a while ago, but then Zelensky gave up this discussion. This desire of Europe to be at the negotiations table, do you think it has something to do with European countries' claims of historical rights for Ukrainian territories? Well, politicians in Romania discussed that recently. I'm not going to guess here. Yesterday, Zelensky said he does not recognize the results of negotiations between Russia and America. How important do you think Zelensky's participation in these talks is? And can he expect to be part of this process? I'm not going into detail on that because this was covered extensively by President Putin in his interview to Pavel Zarubin, so I have nothing to add here. It has been obvious for many that there are attempts to undermine these attempts to resume relationships between Russia and the United States of America. What do you think Russia has to do to prevent those attempts? After this meeting, do you think the America's will to restore relationships with Russia is firm? Well, to prevent any attempts to disrupt this resumption of relationships between Russia and the US. We need to continue, and after this meeting I can say that it's been quite a success. The conceptual approach to further steps, it was laid down by the presidents during their phone call, and we felt great attitude and willingness of our American counterparts to push this forward actively, and we're going to do the same. Thank you.